everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connarton, and this is, of course, a man who really needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. The Honorable Gary S. Hopper. How are you, Gary?
Well, I don't need an introduction.
You're kind of like famous or something, or infamous.
Infamous.
Or
Infamous.
quasi-infamous.
Yeah, but if you're infamous, you still need an introduction. Don't you?
I don't know. I guess it depends.
If you're really
on how
famous, you don't need an introduction, but that's when they introduce people the most.
Right, I know, right? Which
Right?
doesn't seem fair. Like,
does-
you already
yeah.
know who they are.
You know, if you get some schmuck, like, coming on or something like that, you have to introduce them because nobody knows who they are.
Right.
But it's the people that everybody knows about. Why would you bother introducing them? But they go into this long diatribe. And he was a professor at, and then he was 3 years old. He first learned to, use the potty. And
Well, that guy needs an introduction, because
Yeah.
that's impressive.
that is very impressive.
I don't have
Anyway-
kids, so I actually have no concept of what age you're supposed to be.
I don't have
when
any
you learn to
idea.
use.
I just know that girls learn quicker than boys.
Do they?
Absolutely.
I remember my first time on the potty seat, I cried because I thought something important fell out of me. And unfortunately, that's a true story.
Oh, that's too awesome. That is wicked awesome.
Yep.
You lost. I lost a piece of me. George, it doesn't get any better than this. This is it.
He means that literally, but you know because you've been on the show before.
Yes. It's cool because he's doing an exploratory run for governor, so he has to show up anyway, even though it's against his better judgment.
Right.
It's awesome.
Yeah, he's got to make
George Lambert's with us today, the most honorable George Lambert's with us today, talking about his working on running for governor of the great state of New Hampshire.
Yes, sir.
But so, you're a tech guy.
Oh, yeah.
I was curious. One reason I wanted you on, we can talk about that too, but I really wanted to get your impression of the whole NSA thing, and I made the assertion to my co-host Matt, and he totally disbelieves me. I made the assertion that if Obama's going to use the IRS to attack opponents, and there is some connection. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, it was Weekly Standard, 2010. They had an article.
Publication,
yeah,
yes.
conservative publication. There was an article in there about how the Koch brothers were upset that the Obama administration got a hold of their tax records. But anyway, I believe that the Obama administration used the IRS to retard the efforts of the conservatives, particularly the Tea Party movement, in the last election, and I think they're all in cahoots. I also, and this is the nexus that he disagreed with in particular, I believe that they were also, if you look at Congresswoman from California, you remember what her name is?
From California, Barbara Boxer?
No, Congress.
Nancy Pelosi?
No.
They have a lot of...
Yeah.
Anyway, in just before, like about 8 or 9 months before the election, there's a recording of her on YouTube talking about the information the DNC and the Obama administration has to going into the next election is going to blow your mind. In other words, we have the database to actually win this thing. And I believe that the Obama administration used the NSA to obtain a lot of that information. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. I know that it's not something that I've seen a lot in the news. I just believe it's the case.
Well,
because if they're willing to use the IRS, which is probably the most formidable what?
I just want to add, though, to your IRS thing, there are Republicans now in Congress who are openly saying, like Roy Blunt, for example, who are saying, okay, we're backing off on this now because we can't prove that there's any connection between the IRS and the administration.
There are Republicans in the Senate, the United States Senate, and the United States House that are part of the problem. Okay. There's this all-boy, women too, but all-boy network that they're all sleeping together and skimming. So
well, they're all part of the corporatocracy, yeah.
But so yeah, just because they it's like national propaganda radio. They'll be discussing any subject and they'll say, and we have this conservative Republican, and you listen to what the guy says, that's not conservative, that's not Republican. But they'll say it's a conservative Republican because they've defined themselves as a conservative Republican when they're anything but. It's like calling Chris Christie a conservative Republican.
It depends on the issue.
Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted your take on the NSA part of this, what you do know and what you think about the whole Snowden.
All right, so let's start with the facts.
No, not on this show.
All right. Well, give me a second. So the facts are, I've called the Attorney General's office. I've spoken with Richard Head, and I've said, Richard, what does the New Hampshire Attorney General's office know?
You mean Dick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
About the wiretapping, about our wiretapping statute, about what was the state's Attorney General's office notified of in terms of national security letters and other things, and what information did they have, and what did they do or not do to protect the public?
Correct.
And he has told me he will get me a report. He and I were on the phone for about 45 minutes today, making sure that we're all clear on making sure my request was comprehensive. And he gave me some great answers.
Such as?
Well, actually, I was asking him not just about that topic, but I was asking him about the whole Project Veritas voter fraud thing. You know, why is it we spent so much time, money, and resources on investigating the people who clearly weren't participating in voter fraud, while we have all of these people who potentially were participating in voter fraud who aren't getting
prosecuted or even investigated.
Right, and we spent all of this energy because that's where the most evidence was. The fact is that the evidence clearly shows people asking for a ballot but never touching one.
Right.
And you know, I got some clarity from him, and it made me scratch my head.
Wait, stop a second. Project Veritas, is that how you say
Project Veritas, I believe.
Yeah, was people come to New Hampshire, they would go into the voting place, ask for a ballot of somebody they knew had passed away.
They were dead, yep.
They were dead, and just to show you how easily the system could be corrupted, and as soon as that person presented the ballot to them, they would ask, well, don't I need some sort of identification? He goes, no, you don't. And at which point they would back away. They never took possession of the ballot, and they would turn around and walk out. The whole point was to show how easily the system could be gamed.
Is that the gentleman we had on the show who came on to talk about
No, that was Ed Nail, who also worked with Project Veritas.
Okay.
And Ed Nail is Coalition New Hampshire Taxpayers. He's the director.
Gotcha.
And so we've talked about it on the show, but I just wanted to give that background so you can...
So I asked him, I said, what, you know, why did we spend so much money, so much time investigating this? And he said, well, that's where the evidence is. Well, except for the evidence, as far as I'm concerned, clearly indicates that these people were trying to, you know, bring awareness to a problem as opposed to denying someone to the vote or, you know, the bad casting of a vote. You know, and really I see it as a symptom of the distraction of government. When we have rules and laws, we should follow them, but we should actually ask whether or not they're accomplishing the greater good of the people of the state. And in many times, the simple act of going out and engaging isn't in the people's best interest. And a great example of that, not to get too far off the subject, was the Liquor Commission in New Hampshire going out and investigating a poker game at a cigar club where the people who were running the cigar club put up all the money. They said people can play for gift certificates, but while they're there, they're going to smoke cigars and they're going to drink whiskey. Cash flow positive. State police the Liquor Commission shows up and says, hi, we have a problem here. Illegal gambling. Where's the money? Well, there's no money. It's just gift cards.
Right.
It's still illegal, and so we're going to arrest a couple people. We're going to tell some people we're going to take away their liquor license. And you go, well, what law was broken? I mean, really, and by the way, why was the Liquor Commission who's enforcing it? And then you say, we have all these departments and all of these people. And are we accomplishing the public good and spending the money the right way?
Right.
Are we actually stopping what we want to
Wasn't that the same time that the Liquor Commission was under fire for missing huge quantities of... In other words, was it a distractive...
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked. You know, when you have a guy who's the chief enforcement officer for the state in the Liquor Commission suggesting that there's corruption within the Liquor Commission itself, you probably don't want to be posting the guy's job while he's in the middle of making that statement. And there's, I don't know,
that's just a coincidence.
300 300 cases potentially missing of wine. It's sort of a little bit of. I think that's what it was. The facts are a little fuzzy, but I do remember the report coming out and seeing it was rather large, and it really said there are problems. The good news is the legislature has addressed some of those problems, but we still have a systemically large agency that makes its own rules. It sets its own policy. It enforces those rules and adjudicates them. If you own a bar,
there's not there couldn't be a appearance of conflict of interest, could there?
I think it's huge. I gave a talk on that in D.C. last week on the fourth branch of government and how these independent agencies end up actually make their own rules. And I used the New Hampshire Liquor Commission as an example.
Yeah.
But what I said is, if you have the people who are running your licensing, who can come and take your license anytime without a trial, put you out of business until you get through with their process, even if they're wrong and there's no damage to them, you have the potential for corruption.
No, people, no, the government loves us.
The government loves us?
Yes, George, you don't understand. You want to be governor and you don't understand the government is here to help.
And to protect us from ourselves.
Yes, just in case.
Yes.
Yeah, the scariest English words ever spoken is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah. Yeah, Reagan used to say that.
He did, right? And I think every time he did, he just sort of got this little chuckle because he knew it wasn't true.
Right.
I mean, government is the problem. And I say that, and I got in government years ago because I used to complain about it.
Yeah.
And this guy says to me, if you're gonna, you can either complain about it at the water cooler, or you can put your name on a ballot and do something about it. And it was at my dad's funeral, and I went out and said, you know what, the next time I have a chance, I'll go do that. I'll stop complaining at the water cooler. And my neighbor said, funny, that's tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And so the next day I went to the town hall and I put my name on a ballot and I ran.
Yeah.
And I was told when I got elected in Litchfield that I wouldn't last 3 months.
Why did they say that? Anybody can last 3 months in the state legislature.
Well, this was in the state legislature. This was as a selectman. I spent 6 years as a selectman first.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And so we had selectmen's meetings were 45 minutes before I got on the board. They went from 45 minutes to getting out, starting at 7 and getting out at midnight. But we were going to do the people's business in public. We were going to follow the rules. We were actually going to find out what was going on. Because this idea that you could have a selectmen's meeting and do the public's business in a short period of time without having questions answered, with all the problems we were having at the town at the time, was unbelievable. And so I went out and engaged, and I said, I'm going to learn about this. And then what I found out is that we tell the public stories in sound bites, and most of them are partially true. But the superintendent of the school board in Litchfield went out and said, for the first time in my 40-plus years in administration of schools, we have brought in a negative budget. And she was so proud of herself. And I went, wow, that's awesome. And so I looked, and I went, then why are our tax bills going up? What they've done is taken a one-time appropriation and used it as part of the total budget number. And she goes, yeah, we have a reduced budget. Well, technically she was true. But all of our tax bills were about to go up a couple $100.
Yeah.
And she'd sold it in a way that was technically true but misleading.
Yeah.
Why is it we can't actually tell the public the truth?
Well, because I'd never get elected, George.
Well, I think maybe it's time for a change.
Yeah, I mean, really. I mean, that's just...
I have to,
Yeah, that's how it works, yeah.
We're
just realists, George, is what it is.
Right. So it's funny. There's a post on my Facebook today about a friend of mine who actually owns an advertising agency down in New York. He owns a company called the Blend Agency. And he was telling me back in the 90s what building a brand is all about. He said, companies like Apple have a great brand. You can expect a certain type of product from them. Mm-hmm. Okay, and certain other companies over time develop a brand and a reputation. And if you have a good brand and a reputation like LL Bean, you know exactly how you're going to be treated as a customer.
Like a yuppie.
Well, at LL Bean, if you buy a product,
right.
Yeah, true.
If you buy a product, it's lifetime warranted, and they're gonna treat you with some respect on that. They're gonna give you back the money you paid for the shirt that
There was a faux ad, I think it might have been theonion.com, where they had a whole thing about the LL Bean offering free stuff to black people so they'd wear LL Bean stuff because they knew that their product was discriminatory and all this other.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. So anyway,
so the whole point is that the brand matters, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the brand of government today. The brand of government today says that Congress has a 10% approval rating.
Oh, it's going up.
Yeah. You expect the government to lie to you.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
We make jokes about politicians all the time. How do you know that? How do you know when a politician's lying?
Yeah. When his lips are moving.
His lips are moving, right? So this is the culture we have about politics today.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that somebody like me, who goes out and I strictly follow the New Hampshire Constitution. I have a voting record that is out of this world in terms of consistency. You may not like what I have to say, but you can actually track almost a decade of me doing it.
Yeah.
I say, look, you want somebody who's actually not going to lie to you, who's going to do a good job at the corner office. You may not like anything I have to say on any individual issue, but you will know exactly how I'm going to behave. And I'm going to behave based on the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire. And I'm going to bring government officials into account if you elect me. And what that will mean is that the problems you hear about, the little problems, at the DMV will get fixed. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, this is my favorite story. I'm a justice of the peace. Being a justice of the peace is interesting because being a member of the state legislature, you do things. As a justice of the peace, you go out and you sign affidavits, you sign warrants, you sign subpoenas. I mean, there's all kinds of things you sign.
Yeah.
I signed a letter saying that someone lived in Nashua because this lady was in a wheelchair and her son was living with her. He'd moved him to the state and he was there to help take care of her, but he needed a non-driver's license to work. So I went over on a weekend.
Wait, what's a non-driver's driver's license?
It says you didn't pass a driving test, but you live in New Hampshire. It's an ID.
So it's a non-driving ID.
Yes.
Okay.
It's called a non-driver's license.
All right.
And so he needed to go get one from the Department of Motor Vehicles, interestingly enough.
Name.
I know. Right?
I know, huh? So I give him this form. I go to this house, and I take her ID, and I take his ID.
Can you fix that if you become governor?
What's that? No.
We like consistency in our names.
Yeah, it should be a non-driving drivers.
Okay,
Can't be that. That's the.
So.
Anyway, go ahead.
This is where it gets. So we have this. I sign this document saying the guy lives here.
Yeah.
And I send it to the DMV. And I write it out for him, and I look at his ID and I look at her ID, and she swears this document says he lives with me, and I give it to him, and off he goes.
Yeah.
So he calls me on. I get a phone call on Monday. They won't take the document. Why not? Because it's not stamped. I'm a justice of the peace. I don't require a stamp.
Oh, that's a notary, right? A notary.
Notaries require a stamp.
Yeah.
So the lady at the DMV won't take it. And so they call me up on the phone because I had my phone number because I came over to meet the phone.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't you ask what her name is? They wouldn't, and the lady wouldn't answer the question, what's your name? I said, well, you tell her, under RSA 91A, you are required to give me your name. And she says, well, no, I'm not. That's what she told the person here. And I said, that's interesting. I said, I need a supervisor. Ask for a supervisor. And they said, we're sorry. The supervisor's unavailable. And I said, you asked them, there's nothing they can do to help you. And she said, yeah, that's right. I said, you hold on just a moment. And I said, I'll call you right back. And I hung up my phone. And I called up and asked for the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Safety. Okay? And I said, hi. I have a problem. I said, I'm a justice of the peace and I signed this document and they won't take it in Nashua at the registry. He says, why not? I said, because it's stamped. He says, you're a justice of the peace. It doesn't need to be stamped. I said, I know that and you know that, but the power broker at the counter doesn't seem to know that or care. Yeah. I said, well, he said, who is it? And I said, well, I can't tell you because we asked her name under 91A and she won't give it up. And he said, funny, we have somebody who can take care of that problem for you. He says, let me give you a phone number and you have the person you have down there call this phone number and we'll resolve it. And they called up from down there, and then in Concord, they called down to Nashua and said, this is the law, solve this problem, and 20 minutes later, they walk out. Everything's all set.
Yeah.
You know what the only difference was? There was somebody, they had a phone number of somebody to call.
Right.
We have government individuals on the front lines all the time who are not doing the people's business. They're not following the law. And because they are the front face of government, when somebody tells them no, people assume they're right. What we need, what I hope for, is if I successfully run for governor, what I will do by the end of my first day is open the office that you can call, the customer service department that says, who do I call to fix a problem?
Yeah.
So we can actually get good answers.
Right.
We may or may not get good answers.
The courts have a call center now.
Yeah? How's that working out? Because I have some people who are calling me every day about problems in the family courts, about all kinds of issues. I was sitting on redress for 2 years listening to complaints about the family court division and how children are being kept from their families. I watched corruption in the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, where they wouldn't actually give to the redress committee records in New Hampshire. So we asked Massachusetts, because it was an interstate issue. We asked Massachusetts for the records. They gave them to us. The same records that were too secret to actually reveal from New Hampshire, under Massachusetts law, are perfectly public. Yeah. So they gave them to us, and we could actually see corruption in the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. But because you have a culture of secrecy, and this gets back to this Snowden thing, you don't have to be accountable because you can say you can't see the records. And that's the problem. When the government no longer has to answer to the people, it falls into a train wreck. And I want to go and be the person who says, under the New Hampshire Constitution, the government will be open and accountable to the people at all times. The at all times portion of our Constitution is not subjective. Right. It's not a suggestion. It's not a guideline. There's one person in the state who can actually hold our administrative department's feet to the fire, and that's the governor. He is the supreme administrative magistrate for the state, and he can make them follow the Constitution and follow the law. He doesn't need anyone's permission. He doesn't need anyone's blessing. He can just tell them to do the job. And I have seen so much of that since I actually understood at 18 years old that I had the right to vote, that the government is dysfunctional. There's no one at the top who's actually going out and setting the stage.
No, because by the time they get to the point of setting the stage, they've just made so many deals. It's like was it last week we did FRM?
Yeah, that was last week, yeah.
We did FRM, and I've sat on enough of those hearings. I'm going to forget the guy's name. Mike? Was that Mike something?
Michael Gill?
Yes,
yes,
Mike Gill.
Yeah.
I had Michael Gill on. And I don't know that everything he said was true.
I don't know that everything he said was true either, but you know what?
But let me finish. I don't know that everything he said is true, but I have sat in on enough of the hearings and knew enough about the subject that as he laid out that puzzle, every piece of that puzzle that I did know about, he was 100% correct.
Right. There's enough argument in Michael Gill's situation that says we need to find out what happened to the Banking Commission. It was after being on a show with Michael Gill, or not with Michael Gill, after talking about Michael Gill on a program at Speak Up, that I was driving home and someone said to me, I was talking about a fundraiser for the House Republican Victory PAC, and they said, why aren't you running a fundraiser for you for governor? Because unlike many of the other people who might run, you don't know anybody anything. I'm one of those guys who actually hasn't made the deals. I'm not
I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Of all the people that are in the tank for somebody, he ain't one of them.
Yeah.
I'm a different face. I'm the guy who's going to go out and say, this is the way it's going to be, and I don't care who you are. I've called out judges. I've called out the Speaker of the House. I've called out the governor herself. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're not doing the people's business, party doesn't matter. Deals don't matter. My best friend in the House last term was Andrew Manus. And when he screwed it up, I was all over him. It doesn't matter, because it's not my place to use my judgment. It's my place to follow the rule that I agreed to and to keep up the oath that I committed to by the people.
Yeah.
Ethics and constitutionality and the law has to supersede personality.
Yep. And for me, it always has. I wanted a casino in the worst way this year, and I voted against the casino bill. I actually brought you a couple gifts, by the way. Can I give you gifts on?
Are they under $25?
Of course they are. I would like to give you this Reason. Yeah, do you know Reason.com and the Reason magazine, folks? Reason TV.
No, I have not.
I've heard of it. I'm not.
I'm not really into reasoning.
Right. These are poker chips from Reason.com. I'm a big fan of casino
pretty
gaming.
cool.
Yeah. And I wanted a casino in New Hampshire. I love playing poker. I put in a number of poker bills. Can't get them passed. I was thinking we're going to get casinos this year.
Yeah.
I
was actually surprised it didn't go through, by the way.
Well, except for it couldn't. And it was really simple. The state's constitution has a monopoly clause. And when you're only going to put in one, people like me couldn't vote for it. I wanted it. I ran that I was going to vote for it.
That was your problem, wasn't it?
That was an issue. Unlike George, I am.
You have a philosophical.
Diametrically opposed to casinos.
Right.
But
that was your key reason.
But Article 10 says government can't be used to help one entity, and this was basically the government creating an entity so some people could make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the Attorney General's office would have been reporting to the Charitable Gaming Commission. I mean, what kind of corruption is that?
Yeah, that's not right.
Okay, so I have one more gift for you. The cumulative sum of the gifts are not over $25. But
That's too bad.
I know, right?
The last time I was here,
you can give him more than $25.
I understand. The last time I was
you
here,
could give it to me. Like, he could give me $100 worth of gifts, right? No, wait. You give him $100 worth of gifts, me $22.50, and then he could give me $22.50, and so therefore, in effect, I get $45.
Right, but after we're off the air, we'd have to.
Yeah, we'd have to do it off the air because we don't want to get caught.
Tell anybody.
Obviously, technically, I'd be legal, but go ahead.
I'm not a big fan of working around the rules.
Oh.
Oh, that's.
However, the last time I was here, you did let me play with your hand grenade.
Yes.
And so after my last trip, I went out and got you a hand grenade knife.
Oh, no way!
That's awesome. Huh.
Oh, that's wicked cool, dude.
Did you know that every...
I think I love you.
Well,
I think I love you.
Oh, that's awesome.
I figure you should be able to carry your, simulated hand grenade around with you whenever you want. Do you realize that there are no knives that are illegal in the state of New Hampshire? Not even one that looks like a hand grenade?
I didn't know that.
There's no.
I thought there's no law against switchblades.
No, we repealed them all. Jen Coffee.
Jen Coffee, yeah. Remember we had Jen Coffee on?
Oh yeah, she's been on a couple times.
Oh, that's awesome, George. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
That is wicked cool. I don't know if that's visible on the camera, but it is
It's a hand grenade.
It is a hand grenade knife. It's quite a bit more deadly than these.
Yeah.
I suspect so. But the whole point is, I enjoy being out and talking to people like you guys, and we don't agree on stuff. I mean, you and I have had,
knock them out, drag them out.
Knock them out, yeah. Our arguments over certain positions.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, in the council of many, there's wisdom. And in a 400-member legislature, you can find the problems, and you can engage in serious discussion and debate. The people of New Hampshire have one of the finest constitutions in our nation.
Oh, it's awesome.
And it's time to bring accountability of the federal government into account. New Hampshire is uniquely qualified to do that if we have a governor with a backbone who will sit there and say, direct the Attorney General to solve and serve the people of this state. The Attorney General's job is not at present to serve the people of the state. It's to serve the state's departments and the governor.
Yep. I mean, I said that when we were, and this is, small potatoes comparatively speaking, but when we were, you remember 2 terms ago when they first introduced the saltwater fishing license.
Mm-hmm.
And
crazy.
It's crazy. I get up on the House floor, says because the threat was if we don't do it, the federal government is going to do it for us. And I said, well, one of my arguments was, well, that's what the Attorney General's office is supposed to do, is protect the citizens of New Hampshire and say that and fight it in court because the federal government has no authority within 3 miles of that coast.
Right.
Period.
And yet, our current governor, our current Attorney General, and our current structure does not properly represent the interests of the people. Now, what I learned being in the legislature and learning more about history as I go is that we did actually have a governor once who said that, who said, I'm going to stand up for the people of New Hampshire.
Who's that?
I don't remember. But the issue I do remember, and that was the Coast Guard had decided at the time that the big lake, Lake Winnipesaukee, was so large that the Coast Guard ought to patrol it.
Huh. That seems odd.
Well,
Yeah,
and the governor at the time said, well, if you can't get the boat over into our lake through waters you control, there's no way you're using your highways to get your boat over to our lake so that you can patrol it.
Right.
That means it's not international waters.
Yeah, yeah.
And so with that statement, he actually kept the federal government out.
Huh.
In Texas, there's a guy named Dr. Brzezinski who believes he's got a cure for cancer. If you watch the federal hearings on that, it would appear as though he might just have that.
Wow.
Okay? Cured cancer in 1976. Although, according to the FDA, he violated their rules on going through and selling the products. Under a Texas law called Made in Texas and Sold in Texas, no federal regulation or not products made in Texas and sold in Texas are not subject to federal regulation.
And they're not supposed to be.
Correct. But under that law in Texas, the FDA strong-armed the entire department committee on the legislature for repeal to get them to repeal it so they could go after this guy.
Wow.
Okay? My goal is, just like it was last term, to pass a made in New Hampshire, sold in New Hampshire, not subject to federal regulation. And then, if I were to become the governor of the state of New Hampshire, I will defend with the Attorney General the state's rights declared in Article 7 of the New Hampshire Constitution that say the people of New Hampshire forever have the right to run their state as a sovereign state. Now, I didn't make that up. I got a little copy. I don't know if you guys have seen the Constitution, but it basically, our Constitution prohibits the delegation of powers to the federal government. Did you know that?
No, actually, that's one that slipped by.
Oh, you're going to love this. State sovereignty. It says, the people of the state.
Where are we?
Article 7, Part 1st.
Okay.
It says, the people of the state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and do, and hereafter shall, exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right pertaining thereto, which is not, or may not hereafter be, by them expressly delegated to the United States of America in Congress assembled. I'm sorry, but under the New Hampshire Constitution, the power of attorney given by the people to the state to enter into the Constitution of the ratification of the Constitution of the United States, we said you can never delegate this power. It's still here. That means no power to delegate it has ever existed. Someone needs to go out and tell our Attorney General, look, just follow Article 7. You just do that much, and we will have the #1 state in the nation. We will actually create in New Hampshire within a couple of years a place where all of the new technology and innovation begins to happen. We will become the Singapore of North America. People will come here for jobs. People will come here for research. People will come here to solve problems. There is a cure for leukemia that is sitting in a lab in Rhode Island today. One-shot injection cure for leukemia. Read about it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Although, leukemia is worth a lot of money to cure.
Yep.
An awful lot. You get a bone marrow transplant, you spend time in the hospital. By the time you're done, it's millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Who wants to cure it with a single injection? Somebody who's got leukemia wants that.
Right.
Okay, but the medical establishment may or may not. But no one's going to spend $1 billion for an injection that's going to get you out of millions of dollars of expense into the medical system. Mm-hmm. It'll never happen. Why is it those guys can't come up to the University of New Hampshire, finish their research, and actually end up with a business?
Play devil's advocate. The cure for leukemia. If in fact that's true,
yeah.
Why hasn't that same person opened up shop in Singapore? Use your example.
That's a very, very good question. Actually, some of them have. You will actually, not these guys at the University of Rhode Island. but there are people who've actually gone out and taken cancer treatments to Canada, cancer treatments to Mexico, cancer treatments to China and South America. What you need is access to infrastructure, and what you need and facilities and things like that.
Yeah.
And in Texas.
And to continue on that vein, I remember because one of my heroes, one of the few guns I really want to get, it's called Rossi makes what they call the mare's leg.
Uh-huh.
It was
like a horse?
No, a mare's leg. It's basically a lever action rifle with a buttstock cut back and the barrel cut back, so it's legally a pistol.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
like my brother's Judge.
Huh?
My brother has something called a Judge, which is like a shotgun and a...
Yeah, but this looks like a lever action, basically a short lever action rifle, and it's called the mare's leg, and it's the same one Steve McQueen used to use in the '60s on his cowboy show. I forget what it was called, but anyway, Steve McQueen in the '70s went down to Mexico for a cure for cancer, and he died anyway. But I don't know. I think it's, so just because people do that in Mexico, the other issue with that is they go to Mexico, and Mexico doesn't have any laws against it, so there can be some pretty significant shysters in the same vein. You know what I mean?
And with the internet today, and with open discussion, maybe we can actually root some of that out.
I would hope so.
But
Yeah,
right
that's a
now,
good point.
But right now, under the FDA regulations, if you go out and say, I have a possible treatment for cancer, and you're actually promoting it or advertising it in the United States, they say you can't. It's just they've decided that you cannot actually question their authority. The problem is the FDA as a national organization was originally charged with taking care of food and actually doing food inspection. What they found is that they could actually manage the drug industry, and it's become incredibly incestuous. They've turned it into the largest industry in the world. If you look at the total number of drug companies and their profits, there's no industry you can be in that is more profitable than the drug industry.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, remember when me and my friends tried to take Suter's house back in 4 or 5 after the Kelo decision?
No, tell me.
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court, Kelo, Pfizer, tried to use the power of the city of New London to take via eminent domain all this property along the Thames River. And it was and it was not blighted, which is what they had used eminent domain to take property before, like in D.C. It was so blighted that there was rats and there was open sewerage, and they used eminent domain to take it. So they used the same principle in New London, but it was all middle-class homes, people who lived there for generations, and there was nothing blighted about it. But they were using eminent domain. It went to the United States Supreme Court, and a 5-4 decision, and they said that the city of New London, had to prove, they didn't have to prove anything, they had to believe that they would make money off it, or that it would create jobs, and therefore it was beneficial for the city so they could do what they wanted, which is a complete perversion of eminent domain, where Adams referred to it as a tyrannical power.
It is a tyrannical power.
Right. And so it was Pfizer that was trying to get the property, basically, through using the government. So, yeah, I mean, it's if they've got so much money they can try to steal people's property, then. But that's when we tried. Souter was one of those who voted in favor of that it was okay for the city of New London to do what it wanted, and it was me and some friends in Ware who tried to take his house and build a hotel on it. We had a Warren article and everything else.
Wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, how'd that go?
Well, too many people are, and this is what you're going to run up against as running for governor. There are too many people who have this myopic view of government, and all they will look at is he pro-Second Amendment, is he anti-Second Amendment, so you lose this percentage, is he pro-life, anti-life. They'll go through that, and that's the informed voters.
Yeah.
Okay? There was too many voters who looked at the eminent domain and how abused it was, and all they could think about, well, Judge Souter's been here forever, and who cares what happened in New London, Connecticut?
Right.
They had no perception of how profound a decision that was, because that means anybody's house could be taken by anybody if they've got the connections.
In other words, they missed the point
They
of what you were
completely,
doing.
they completely didn't get it.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, Article 7, if we had a attorney general and a governor who are willing to stand up for the people of New Hampshire and tell the federal government to pound sand, that is so profound that I don't think people it's your biggest hurdle is going to get people to understand what you just said. And I agree with you 100%.
Here's the good news. It's worked in Litchfield, in this little tiny town that I was on the Board of Selectmen for. For all people thought I was a little crazy, and some people did along the way.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. I definitely appear that way. When I was done, it was better. Okay? Because accountability, transparency, and an expectation changes it. That's what we learned about from Apple. Okay? Steve Jobs was the CEO of Apple. When he was there, product quality was really high. He left. The product quality went down. The company went down. Right? He came back, and it changed. Why? Were the employees different? No. The expectation at the top was different. Okay, the expectation was you're going to behave in a certain way, and our organization has a certain set of values. I would like to bring the values to the corner office in New Hampshire that says government's going to do what it was chartered to do. That's by the Constitution. It's going to be a service industry to the people who foot the bill. We're going to get the problems in government out. We're going to return jobs. The way you return jobs is you actually go out and talk to people who had jobs here and left. Last week, I was with a guy who took 100 jobs out of Salem, New Hampshire, and moved them out of state. And I said, what's it going to take for you to bring them back and put it in writing? And I have the letter from him right now that guarantees if we go out and make a change, one change, he will bring back those jobs, and it will bring back more jobs from other people who've left. It has to do with the way that we deal with our business profits tax. Okay, but it costs too much. If we actually go out and we take our business profits tax the way it is today, and we say we're going to freeze it, this is how much revenue we need. We're not going to change that. But let's go out and change the way in which we calculate it so that it's capped at whatever it is we say we need.
Right.
And then the more money people make, the more businesses we bring to New Hampshire, the less it costs everyone. All of a sudden, we become an incentive place to have a business.
So his argument is the lack of dependability, not the quantity per se, but the fact that it can be changed constantly. Is so prohibitive to him being able to figure out if his bottom line could change so radically from year to year that it's not worth going with that insecurity.
Right. And his separately owned businesses. The way that we actually deal with some of the ownership and basically some of his income liability from his out-of-state business was costing him and some of his business partners a lot of money. And they went out and said, you know what? We're just going to keep the building we own. We're going to leave the state, and we'll rent it to someone else. And it's pathetic. We have people who want to bring jobs to New Hampshire because we are such a rich state in terms of culture and in terms of diversity, all of this other stuff. If we do the right thing, then we will bring in the results. If made the governor of New Hampshire, will be on the phone saying, come to New Hampshire. Let me show you why. Let me drive you around to help you pick a spot where you can bring us jobs.
Right.
We are going to seed the jobs market. My message to the people of New Hampshire is work with me, and it'll be about jobs. It'll be about jobs and reduction of business regulation, which I've already fought for in the House and won. It'll be reducing the administrative burden of administrative agencies. I fought that in the House, and I've already won HB 222, reduce broad-based rulemaking authority for every department in the state. We're going to reduce regulation on, reduce the paperwork burden. I've put in a bill for that a couple of years ago to go out and make it so you can streamline hiring new employees.
Yeah.
I did some work with a guy from Manchester, or from Nashua, who didn't put in he was supposed to get unemployment compensation and workman's compensation insurance. They sound very similar. He got one, he didn't get the other. He, called the state. He said, I got this. I'm not sure if I have everything. They said, no, you're missing something. So he went out and got it. He immediately took care of the problem. He called them, told them about it. The result of him calling a State Department and saying, what do I need and am I in compliance, was they sent him a fine for $147,000.
Oh, my God.
Because he called to make sure he was in compliance.
That's terrible.
This is happening every day.
Yeah.
And the culture is not, are we getting what we need, but and we need to switch it to that.
Yeah, I think the state agencies are almost like police departments that go out of their way to find people who violated a parking violation by 20 seconds because they make money off it.
Yeah.
It's a money-making operation as opposed to a facilitating operation.
Yeah. It's time to get back to the fundamentals of, what makes New Hampshire great. And the fact is that we have a license plate that says live free or die. Okay?
I thought it was because I was here.
No, it's only
that's a misconception. I know a lot of people think that.
it's only the first half.
Oh.
Do you know the rest of that statement?
No, I don't.
I do. I said live free or die for
Death is not the worst of the evils.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The evils they were talking about was the oppression of government that the people of New Hampshire were under the British Crown. The reality is that the government we've gotten today is not the government we tell my 3rd and 4th graders about.
Right.
It is, if we just had that, I'd be out running bigger businesses and actually making more money. It is incredibly expensive for somebody like me, who really am in the prime of my life in terms of work, to go out and say, I could go out and make more money for my wife and children by running high-tech technology companies. But no one has stood up and said, with a voting record and a history like mine, we can change our nation. We can set a new example. We can really make a difference. And for the first time, you can believe again that the government will actually listen to you. The IRS, the NSA, Benghazi, at a national level, all should scare you. It's worse because the investigation into voter fraud by our Attorney General's office, they've just concluded. Great for them. They were investigating the people who were actually telling them the system was broken.
Right.
We're fundamentally doing the wrong things, and we don't have enough resources. If we had infinite resources, big government's fine. We don't. We all have to pay for it. So since we're all having to pay, in my house we have to choose. Am I going to buy this or am I going to buy that? We can't have everything, so we're going to choose. What are we going to choose and prioritize? I would hope that the administrative departments of the state of New Hampshire would start making sure that we could deliver smaller, better, more responsive services that make a difference to more citizens.
Yeah.
In Manchester, you have a welfare department that spends 2/3 of its money administering the money it's going to give to people. Come on,
Right.
that's fundamentally broken.
Right, right.
We can do better.
How much of this, too, is the lack of modernization of government? I know we hear a lot, well, we don't hear enough about it federally, but like in the state of New Hampshire, does the government need to be modernized? Because you always hear about these archaic computer systems and whatnot that...
We probably do, but before we actually work on modernizing the government, I would say that you need to look at what you could learn from the Avram Goldratt Institute. They were the people who do business process reengineering, and they help people like Saturn, a car company, go out and figure out how to build dealerships faster. And what they realized is that you need to find the largest problem and fix it first. Delegate all resources to fixing the largest problem and reevaluate, find the next largest problem, and then do things faster.
Okay.
Using their methodology, they were able to change, they participated in a competition on what's the fastest house that could be built under Habitat for Humanity, going from a flat foundation until all of the inspections were done and you hand over the keys so someone could move in. How long do you think it takes? 9 months? A year?
No.
If you do it right, I think you do it 3 months.
3 months?
2 months.
How about less? Give me another guess. I'm going to let you get, we're running out of time. Guess fast.
3 weeks.
No. Less.
2 weeks.
Less.
1 week?
Less.
3 days.
Less.
2 days?
Less. You should look it up online. They did it in a little under 5 hours.
Really?
Now, how do you go from a foundation to a completed house with all of your inspections? You do it by better planning. You do it by figuring out what you can do at the same time and bringing in all the resources. Yeah. We should actually know this because we've seen Home Makeover where they actually do the whole thing in a week, right? They tear it down, they rebuild it, and you're done.
That's true.
When you have infinite resources and you say, what are we trying to accomplish? You can accomplish great things. When you have somebody with the right vision in the corner office in government, and we say we're going to do the right thing for the people of New Hampshire, we could turn this around and set an example that would set the nation on fire in terms of less government intervention, more innovation, and really put the United States back on the map. We have become a service provider, not a manufacturer, We're not leading anymore.
Yeah, but that was deliberate. I mean, that was back in the early 90s. It was Clinton and Bush Sr. saying that, I think it was the first time I heard it, I think it was Clinton saying that we're going to go to a service economy. It was quite deliberate.
Yeah. Except for now we have very few people who want to buy our services outside of ourselves. We have printed so much money that it is becoming worthless. We have so much crony capitalism in government that we have obstructionism. And we need to stop it. The government needs to be responsive to the people, not printing money, not destroying our nation. It's time to put the appropriate image and accountability in the corner office so that we can say, we can predict in advance the behavior of government and it's going to do my business and my bidding based on the power I gave it and nothing more.
Okay, wait, okay. We got to go, but if you get elected governor, can I get one of those pens that say, Governor George Lambert?
I'll be delighted to give you one. Okay. I'll be delighted to give you one, actually, as soon as I figure out that I can raise enough money to run a campaign to win. I'm meeting a lot of people, and a lot of people are feeling inspired by this story because nobody has gone out and said it's time to stand up.
No, it's a completely different tack, and I do appreciate it because most campaigns are all about, well, if you vote for me, I'll reduce taxes or I'll increase taxes. I'll get more services, I'll get less services, and without talking about the rudimentary problem.
The rudimentary problem in government is that we've lost touch with the business of government, and our two-party system has become fundamentally flawed because, as you said earlier, we've lost the message. In reality, I've been working on a campaign called Rethink Republican for a couple of years, and it really is, what does it mean? What is it that the Republican base actually cares about, and what is it the independents care about that should be the new charge for Republican? The greatest Republican that I have ever read about, the person who convinced me to be a Republican, is a guy who I've never met, I've never seen on television. This guy named Barry Goldwater.
Okay.
And Barry Goldwater changed the expectation of what it meant to be a Republican with a book. The day somebody handed me that book, I switched from being a Democrat to a Republican. I almost went to work on a Hillary Clinton campaign. And when people go, what do you mean you were going to be a Democrat? Well, no, I was going to be a Democrat because, you know what, for me it was all about social issues.
Right.
And somebody said, wait a second, are you, have you ever watched their fiscal behavior? And I go, well, I don't care about that. Well, in reality, I thought that the social protections were important. I thought that limited government didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And in reality, I just wanted the government out of my life.
Right.
What I realized in the last election is the Democrats actually won based on a liberty argument of get the government out of my pants, get the government out of my bedroom, and get the government out of my health care.
Right.
Actually, what they said, the Democrats went out and sold, if you let Romney get elected, we'll take away your Medicare and Medicaid to the elderly population. It's not really the case, but it was, we're going to take something away from you. We need to fix that.
Yeah.
Hey, George, we got to go.
Thank
you very much, young man.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very much, George.
And thanks for this wicked cool.
I am really glad. I've been holding that for you for a couple of months.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.